Welcome to Forensic Friday,
where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all. So, you guys, we have kind of a special treat on this episode. We're going to talk about Nat's near-death experience with a few special guests. We have her sister-in-law, Brittany, who is a firefighter and will introduce herself in a little bit. And she's an OG forensic bestie, like probably the first one who listened, wore the merch,
literally
things.
If you go to our Instagram, we have a video of literally just her in one of the shirts.
Yeah, that's pretty much, you're our model.
It's fine. I live in it. It's just so cozy. It's easy to sell because it's like livable.
That's right.
See, you heard it from the woman herself.
The woman herself, who is so much cooler than us. We were just talking about this. Oh, and Preston is here as well, Nat's husband. He's been here before. He has the best radio voice of all of us.
Absolutely.
And probably listens to the most podcasts. So he gives us constructive criticism and also not a ton of it because I'm a pansy. And what? You give us constructive criticism, but not too much of it because I'm a little bit of a pansy.
Oh, okay.
So I appreciate that.
So,
but that's why I suspect that he is taking my feelings into account, probably.
Or he just likes it.
Do you really? Well, you would tell the truth. You're a truth teller.
But okay, here's something about Brittany and Preston. They are the same human.
I have heard this before. They're brother and sister, obviously, right?
Because they are the same.
Sister-in-law.
I have a better mustache than she does, though.
I'm working on mine.
Wait till perimenopause. You'll be surprised. Every day.
No, for real, for our listeners, Brittany and Preston. So Brittany's husband, David, who opted out because he's too cool for us.
Lame.
Always used to talk about how we married the same person. So Brittany trained me at one point for a bikini show. And then she was like, I'm over you. You're going to my husband. And so then David trained me. And when I would train with David, we would always talk about how Brittany and Preston are just the literal same.
That is probably pretty good context as well. Brittany is a genuine badass. So not just a firefighter, but like a strong chick.
Absolutely.
And David's a ginormous. I don't know any other way to say it. He's ginormous, very strong. He has a survival story as well. So Nat, we talked about you giving kind of an overview of what happened. And then I have some questions for you guys to talk about.
Cool. So, and Brittany and Press, feel free to jump in with anything you'd like to add. But quick overview. So a year ago from this trip, so we took this trip in August,
23?
Yeah.
Natalie just muted it and yelled at Preston.
I was wondering what that was.
Oh yeah, she's real quick with the mute because she eats, laughs, drinks coffee. She does all the things. So she'll be like,
I'll mute myself.
Yep, absolutely. Yell at Preston to quiet down and then get back on.
Yep, exactly.
Good work.
Yeah. So we went to Zion this past August, like mid-August, second week or something. But we had gone to Zion last year in September. And it was such a different experience. So we did a different hike to start with. We did Angel's Landing, which was super fun. And Brittany, I don't know if she's going to kill me for telling this, but she's like kind of, I think, terrified of heights. Is that accurate? Yeah.
1000%. Yes.
Yes. She's terrified of heights. And she did this hike like a boss. Oh. And it's terrifying. I mean, you have to hang on to like a rope or a guardrail or whatever as you hike up so you don't fall. Because there's not a carabiner in the world that I would trust with my life to do that. There's no way. No. So, but that's how steep it was. So we started that hike and and you have to get a permit for that one. Okay. So that's going to be a big kind of part of some of the stories.
Why do you have to get the permits?
That's a great question for Preston.
Because I don't actually know.
or Britt?
Yeah, Preston would answer it. He's
Some of the more famous national parks are so popular, and there's literally people traveling there from all around the world. I mean, Zion National Park in Utah is on the top 10 list of things to see in the entire United States. I think it's like number 4 or something like that. So people literally come here just to see that from other countries even. So you can imagine how many people it draws per day. And so they have to limit, and they're at Angel's Landing is probably their most famous hike. I guarantee you've seen pictures of it without even knowing what you were looking at. It's one of those that's on posters and postcards.
Well, I looked it all up after this happened because I couldn't visualize what happened to my friend, so I had to look at everything.
So anyway, they have to limit the number of people that could hike per day on a lot of these hikes. It's for a few reasons. It's safety / preserving the park, preserving the hikes and stuff like that. They can only employ so many park rangers to.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So they can, if they had 1,000 people trying to do that hike in one day, it would be chaos. People would.
Didn't they have to do that with Hanging Lake here? Because people are like pooping in the water and stuff.
I was gonna say that was less of a safety issue and more of preserving, because people were destroying it.
They were, which is
there's a lot of hikes like that here now. I mean, I did Capitol Peak a long time ago, and I did it. Luckily, I got into where we just drove up and backpacked in. Now you have to have a permit to even hike in.
It's because people fall off the freaking ridge.
They sure do.
Well, it's also because it's just so many people.
What'd you say, Britt?
It's a big dummies.
I mean, it is terrifying. Like, I don't know who saw that and said, I'm going to go across that. That looks like a great day. You practically have to straddle it and scoop.
This guy.
He did.
It's terrifying.
Or I don't know where you guys see him on my screen.
I see him over here.
Oh, he's up there to me.
Okay.
Yeah, Preston did it. Funny story about that, and then we'll get back into the Zion. So this was like the first year Preston and I started dating, and I invited him to a Sam Hunt concert. And then he tells me like a week later, he's like, oh, so I can't go because I have plans hiking. And I was like, well, thank God you have cool sisters, because now I'm going to invite them.
It wasn't just hiking. I had put together, me and a buddy were attempting to put together a men's ministry where we took guys to do badass stuff in the outdoors, and that was our first trip, our first and only trip. It didn't actually
I was gonna say, Preston, how many more trips were there?
It didn't end up going anywhere. But
Did they fall off the mountain?
What, Britt?
Did they fall off the mountain?
we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
We went
You're
once
the
and two of us
reason.
came back.
No one got sued. Let's just say that.
There was a guy that was really cool to see. He was like, I was always having to talk to him. Our church had this mentorship program where, you were the leader of a small group, and they put like younger guys who needed mentoring underneath you, blah, blah, blah. But there was a kid that was just such a severe, like tragically, like a mama's boy.
A tragic mama.
And he was an adult. And I kept on having to tell him, I'm like, yo, why are you always like 20 or 30 minutes late?
And I'm pretty sure.
Well, my mom makes me dinner. And I'm like, it's one night a week. You don't have to stay for dinner. You're 20.
I think his mom also did his laundry. Anyway.
But it was like a launching pad to him. It clicked something, summiting that peak. He was the only guy between me and the other host that didn't turn around. The other guy,
because his life flashed before his eyes, and all he saw was his mom. He was like, "I got to do more. I can't just hang out with mom.
I can't just hang out with my mom my whole life." Yeah, he was the only guy that summited the peak with us, which for that peak is a pretty big deal.
And it like changed his life. He like ended up traveling and doing this like world mission trip thing. I mean, he just like full send into different.
Doesn't that make my theory make sense though?
One of the guys that came with us was a competition rock climber in high school, and he turned around and went back.
Okay. Anyway. Okay, so Zion. So we went last year, hiked Angel's Landing. It was awesome. We all conquered some level of fear with that one. And then we did the Narrows, which is what we did this year. So we did the Narrows, and I don't like water. Like both Britt and Preston know I'm not a water person.
Black cat.
I'm a black cat. So we do the Narrows last year, and the water's high. I mean, we didn't know any different last year because we had never done it. But in my opinion, now it was high and it was muddy. So it clearly had probably been at some points flooding. So we get in, I don't even know, like y'all correct me if I'm wrong. We probably went like maybe 2 miles, maybe in the first trip. And I was like, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to keep going. I see walls and just water. And I just don't love this for me. And it had started raining.
We should explain what the hike is.
Well, I'll let you do that.
Okay.
Anyway, so I just saw that, so I wanted to leave. But Preston, yeah, do you want to explain what the hike is?
Yeah, so when she was saying she just sees walls and water, the Narrows is a slot canyon. And it starts out at the river, which is not much of a slot canyon. You're pretty much in a real, what you'd picture like a canyon, huge between two big mountain ranges. And then you hike in the river upstream. And the further you go up, it turns more and more into like what you would picture a true slot canyon to be. And
narrower.
Yeah, slot canyons they weave through like desert types of landscapes, and they're very thin.
Yeah.
And they're usually sandstone, which is soft. And so the river, over however many years it's been there, has carved out this slot canyon that's basically like super tall, straight walls on both sides of you. And so the further you go up this river, you start out in the canyon's a couple miles wide.
Right.
And then the further and further you hike up, it gets skinnier and skinnier, and there's less land on the side of it. Eventually you get up to points where it's just straight walls coming right out of the river on both sides.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wasn't this slot canyon where the guy from like 127 Hours or something, that movie, that had to chop off his arm? Wasn't he hiking a slot canyon?
Yes.
It was, yeah. He was in a slot canyon. He was in Utah too, I think. And
yeah, he was.
That's what I thought. That was a good visual, I guess, for me. I was like, oh, I need to watch that movie again.
So we'll get into that later part of the story, but later on when we found out what happened further downriver, that's kind of more the area he was in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's where we were. Last year, we had done some research on other hikes, and there's this one called the Subway. We didn't get to do it last year because that one is also, you have to get a permit. And if you don't get a permit early enough, then you have to win like the 24-hour lottery the day before. So last year, we weren't able to do the Subway. But if you look at pictures, it's beautiful. Okay. But we weren't able to do that last year. So this year, that was one of our goals. Well, we didn't know that you had to apply in like May.
Yeah, I didn't get to the application process soon enough. I thought I was giving myself plenty of time.
Yeah.
But I should have done it like 3 months early.
Yeah.
And
we did it a month early.
Yeah. So I had to
go. And I guessed correctly when Nat and I talked about this, that Subway means it goes down.
No, that's just the name of it, and they just named it that because it looks like a subway tunnel.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of keyholes, which means like slot canyon is like it's open at the top.
Okay.
Subway is like there's
a bunch of keyholes,
circles that you like little tunnels that you can see through, but tunnels that you walk through. So there's no top to pieces of this.
Yeah, to parts of it.
Yeah.
That sounds scary too.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So we didn't get that in time. Okay. So I actually felt really bad because I remember David specifically was really stoked for the Subway. And I was like, oh man, like I don't want Brittany and David to be disappointed that we're basically doing the same things again and whatever. Like I don't usually really care as long as we're like doing something fun and active, like I'm good with whatever. And also I don't need to be in a keyhole canyon when I already hate water. So for me, I was like, whatever, but I felt bad because I knew David specifically really wanted to do this and Brittany too. So we didn't get it. So we all drove in Brittany's truck to Utah. Okay. And we were like, we'll do the Narrows again first. So we plan on that. We started at what, like 11? 10:30, 11 that day?
Probably around.
Yeah. So we started a little later.
Did you have like a start time, like a period of time you need to start? It's just your for that day.
Because this one you don't need a permit for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We decided because we were trying to pull the permit for Subway.
Yeah.
And Angel's Landing again, honestly, but we knew we wanted to try Narrows again because it was kind of creepy the first year and sketchy, so we turned back.
Yeah.
But that one was kind of a free one. So since we didn't pull a permit for that first day, for Subway,
Yeah.
we decided, okay, let's do Narrows today. Hopefully we pull the permit for the next day and we can do Subway tomorrow and or go find some other canyons or Angel's Landing or other cool hikes because Zion is filled with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was our game plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we started our hike and it was beautiful. I mean, I don't remember there being really cloud in the sky when we started. And the water was much lower and it was like clear. It was blue. I mean, I showed you pictures.
Than the year before.
Yeah.
Crystal clear. Like you could see the rocks clearly. I mean,
in some of the parts.
Well, the year before, so just to kind of lay the scene a little bit, like the year before we went, and the reason we turned back so soon is because it just seemed more sketchy and there were flash flood warnings.
Okay.
And the water was muddy and it was higher. And so we went into this year comparing everything to the year previous. The reason we even went so early in the summer was to try and avoid flood season.
Got it.
And so when we showed up and the river was crystal clear, just like the pictures you see of people doing that famous hike, we were like, yes, this is awesome. You know,
you're feeling really good about it.
Yeah, we were like, this is we timed it right, you know.
Yeah.
And we didn't get warned. Like the year before, they were like, you're gonna die if you go on this hike. And we're like, okay, like settle down, you guys are crazy. And then we're like, okay, maybe they're right. This year, not a peep. No one was like, it's gonna flash today.
Nobody
just
said
smile and wave.
And like Brittany's totally right. Like the year before, we thought everyone was like the boy who cried wolf. It was like every single person you ran into was just terrified of the river flashing. And this year, they dropped us off on what we would later find out was the worst possible day we could have gone in. And they knew that. And here's the deal. I'm not blaming any park rangers. They were doing their jobs. And I think it's, you know, when you spend a lot of time in the outdoors, the burden is on you to do the research, right? So I take. But
didn't you have a bus driver that literally took you and dropped you off?
That's what I was weird about. That's the only part that I was weird about, that I was maybe a little complainy about, was that the last stop on the shuttle system is the Narrows.
Yeah.
And so you're on that shuttle for like 45 minutes. And when he dropped a bus full of like 30 people off at the Narrows, didn't say a thing about the super high flash flood danger that day.
Yeah, it was a high risk day, not unlike a red flag day in Hawaii or like wherever.
Right.
Yeah.
So that
would have given you a pretty easy warning, I would think.
Yeah. So that's the one thing I felt like they definitely could have done better. We got shamed a little bit on our way out. We'll get to that part later.
Get there. Brittany
and
got
Brittany
shamed.
Yeah.
So
that's gonna make me mad.
Like I said, Britt, jump in whenever too. So we start hiking and it's fun. We're having a good time. The water's like actually a lot lower, like I said earlier. And I know this because I'm the shortest out of the bunch. Okay,
by a little bit. Well, Brittany, you're not super tall.
I'm 5'3".
Okay. So
but I'm
tall compared to Nat, but not tall.
Yes. I'm like 5'1" on a good day.
Yeah, on a very good day.
You know, water to Brittany that's like, you know, rib level is like chest level for me.
Yeah.
right? So it was a lot lower. And I noticed it probably, I want to say the most because I'm so short, right? Like last year, there was a point in the river where I ended up going under. Preston is going to jump in and be like, that's because you went in a different part of the river. Anyway.
It is. It's because everyone was like, it's deeper over there. And she's like, I don't know. And she went over there and then I look back and she's swimming. And we're all walking. She's like, Preston. And I turned.
The ultimate I told you so. It's like, look, she's gone.
Like instant karma for Natalie.
Instant.
It wasn't my finest moment.
Right.
So we start hiking and there was one point where there was like a little bit of rain and wind. And I don't know if you guys remember that point. It was a big
I
wind.
have it on video.
Oh yeah. Oh, you should send me that.
There was like a micro burst of wind almost that came through.
Because the rain that came around that corner was insane. And I was like, oh my God. And then it went away. And I was like,
And then it was like clear again.
it's weird. Yeah.
It was like clear skies.
Yeah.
So at that point though, I looked at Preston or at, either that point or a different point, because there was a little bit of thunder too when that happened. I was like, I think that's God's way of telling us. I literally said this to him. I said, I think this is God's way of telling us that we shouldn't keep going. And he's like, we're fine.
I didn't know that.
Brittany, I literally said it.
I wouldn't have listened to you either, though, because
See,
you're kind of a
that's
worry
what up.
We all wanted to keep
You're a
going.
worry.
We are now at this point in the hike too. We're about probably 4 miles in. And we were like, we're starting to get stoked about how far we're making it. We're thinking maybe we'll go the entire 12 miles.
And I'm like,
David, out of everyone who is, his knees are like that of 100-year-old person's. Like, he just doesn't do a lot of hiking. He's like, yeah, we're going all the way. Like, he's so excited. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And honestly, David was kind of my gauge, because David and I are similar in that we don't like water. David's just much bigger. So David's kind of my gauge of like, okay, if he's not super freaked out, then I can try to calm myself down, because if he was freaked out, then I'd be like, we're for sure turning around. Right? I don't base my gauge off of Brittany or Preston because they're daredevils. So we're going through, and at that point, we're about 4 miles in, and then we just kept going. It was really awesome. At one point, Brittany and David took a picture in this other little canyon area, which is an important part of Britt and David's story. They took this picture, and we were like, well, I can't remember if it was both of you, Britt, or if it was Preston, but someone was like, we should go in there, but then we decided not to.
Oh, it was a slot canyon that branched off of the main canyon.
Yes.
It was so, I think we all, because we were like, oh, we really want to see how far that goes. But then, like, we don't know where it leads. Maybe we should just keep going up this main way.
Yep.
My thought was like, we should hit that on the way back.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I was conflicted. I was like, which way is the way where you see the more famous? I didn't know. So anyway, we didn't have like a big conversation about it, but we all just kind of kept on going up the main river.
So we get up there, and that was when, and we all kind of have a different story, and this is where I'm going to turn it to kind of all of us. But we were about 6 miles in, right?
6.
That's good.
Yeah, 6 or 7, right? I don't remember.
Yeah, it was about 6.5, because I remember I looked at my watch, and we were at 6 just a little bit before that. So we keep going, and we get to like about 6.5 miles, we'll call it. And
Canyon.
And the canyon flooded.
Well, the canyon at this point, the whole canyon is probably only 15 to 20 feet wide. And it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's not much to stand on.
And the rock, like it's mountains on either side, kind of, right? Like it's super high.
It's a sheer sandstone wall on both sides coming right out of the water.
And sandstone's really slick too when it's wet, right? And
Yeah,
smooth.
there's just nothing to grab onto. It's
Yeah.
all
Like you
worn down.
can't try to like rock climb out.
Right.
So we see this rushing water come. I say around the corner. Preston's like there was no corner, right? But I would love for each of us to share a little bit of what we felt in that moment and what that experience was like. So Britt, I don't know if you want to start us off with what you saw, what you heard, and then what you felt in that moment.
Okay. Well, in that moment, because I remember you and I were walking together and the boys were, I don't know, 20 yards ahead of us or something. So it looked like they were at what me and you were seeing as a corner. Obviously, it was just a slight bend.
Yeah.
If Preston was saying there was no corner, and then, I mean, I don't know if you had the same thought process, but like, I kind of heard like a crash, it seemed like. I'm like, huh? Whoa, what was that? And then both looking up around the corner, it looked like all of a sudden a waterfall. Like the water was just bubbling around this, like a waterfall was coming down. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I think me and you looked at each other, were like, shit.
Oh yeah.
And then the water just starts rushing around this bend and it is straight brown and it has a bunch of sticks and stuff in it. And me and Natalie look at each other, we're like, F and run. So we turn, we run. I'm pretty sure the boys were yelling at us like, run. And then we attempt to run.
Attempted to run. Yeah. So for you, Britt, would you say the feeling you had when you saw that water, like, was it fear? Was it like, what was the feeling you had?
Not yet. It was just like, because I've never experienced anything like that. And I didn't know how Hollywood it could get, you know?
Valid.
Really, like, okay, how much water is this going to be? Is this going to be like a 10-story building high, like Hollywood movies? Or, you know, so I wasn't really sure. I was just like, okay, run. Like I wasn't scared at that point at all.
Yeah.
And then you kept falling and tripping on rocks. So I'm like trying to pick you up and hold you up.
Yeah.
And all I was thinking at this point is like, we're good. We just got to get to higher ground so that this water doesn't take us.
Right.
That was literally probably only maybe 10 seconds of thought process of us attempting to run before we got swept away.
Yeah.
But at that point, no fear. Really.
Okay. What about you?
Yeah, so me and David were, like Brittany said, we were a little ahead because me and David at this point were probably the biggest little kids as far as excitement level goes for the hike. We were like, oh my God. We're like skipping, you know, we're just like, yay, we're
going to see some rocks.
That's adorable.
Just a quick side note, this is what happens when David doesn't join, because now he is going to be referred to as a little excited kid with Preston.
I'll go get him.
Side note, the year and this year was the first I realized something new that I never knew about David. Maybe you did, Brittany, but it was so new to me because David's not the most outdoorsy guy in the world. Like he loves to go do that kind of stuff, but he's not like always out in the, you know, woods or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like his eyes light up when he does that stuff. He's just that adventure is like, he loves it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's something new that I realized about him on this trip or on the year before trip, really, but this one also, to where he just is like, yeah, let's go all the way, baby. Like he's stoked, which fuels me because that's how I feel when I get out there. And I'm like, yes, David loves this. This is great. So we're up ahead, we're chatting, and, you know, me and David banter quite a bit. We have a similar sense of humor, and, I can't remember really what we were talking about. We had to make jokes about flash floods that day.
Oh, I heard that when someone took a picture in the beginning, you said, say flash flood.
I go, say flash flood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that funny joke.
Yeah. So
not so funny.
Yeah. So we're ahead of them. And I'll just say corner because it's going to be hard to put into words that people can picture what it was that we were looking at.
Okay.
There was almost like a belly that came off of the canyon to the
Brittany's
left.
face is like, what?
That does not help people picture a mountain, Preston.
No,
Like a
not a
belly,
mountain.
like a beer belly.
If you're looking at the canyon and it's straight like this, there was almost like a belly in it to the left, but the canyon continued straight after that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm trying to say it so the listeners can kind of
Yeah,
have
you're
a
good.
picture.
You're
Anyway, I think that's what you guys are visualizing as the corner.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, perspective matters in these situations. And when something crazy like this happens, everyone always has a different story.
Mhm.
So
Oh, for sure.
you
Yeah.
can never trust it. Even people who are trained for it in the
Mhm.
military, they always have different stories. Cops
It's
do.
so true.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm not trying to pretend I know, but that's what I remember is that there was this like little bed of rocks in this kind of quote unquote belly on in the edge, and we had to kind of like walked over there, and it got a little shallower there, so we
Mhm.
our legs were more out of the water. And as we kind of continue to walk up, me and David walked into the center, and I stepped out first, and I audibly go, "Whoa."
Like you could feel water moving.
The current was strong, and I'm a fly fisherman. I stand in rivers quite a bit, and it's
You
they're
do.
powerful. And you know when it's too much to cross a river. You can tell it before you get too deep. You can understand like probably shouldn't cross here because
So
this
even
thing.
though the water wasn't high, you knew from the force of it that it was
Oh,
not.
well, I felt it before I saw it. I mean, the second I stepped in deep enough water to where I could feel the current on my legs, I go, "Whoa."
Mm.
And I look up, and there is a hard line. Remember, the water was crystal clear before this. There is a
Oh.
hard line of muddy water, deeper muddy water, pushing down the canyon towards us
Mm.
with debris and logs. And I look back, and me and David locked eyes, and I think we both said shit.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I immediately felt guilt and real bad, real
Mm.
bad. And I look from David to Brittany and Natalie,
Mm.
and they were, everybody's eyes probably looked the same.
You were
We were
scared. You were
scared.
all
I
scared.
wasn't feeling. I don't know if I ever really feared for my own life, but I was scared for everybody, you know. And
Well, these are your people, Press. I mean, this is.
well, and I know we're running. We're like, I
Mm.
go, and David's like, yeah. And we all have this. I think in that moment, we all had the same reaction. You cannot outrun it. And
No.
I'm thinking that in the back of my head. I'm now feeling it on the back of my legs,
Oh no.
already higher. Okay, what was it? My knees was now mid thigh,
Mm.
and I was like, oh no. I'm like, it's only gonna 6 inches higher, and I won't be able to withstand the current.
Mm.
And so I'm running, and now, and I'll stop right here after I say this piece.
Okay.
Brittany is like Natalie said, Brittany's my baby sister, but she is a badass.
Oh, genuine badass.
I'll thump
Genuine
her on the
badass.
head just because I can, but she's
Mhm.
badass. Okay. And she's got swift water training through the fire department. And
She's holding
yeah,
up
a
her
little.
fingers like a little.
Well, that's why I'm trying to
Tiny bit.
paint the picture, because me and her, and I've been trained a little like Brittany's baby swiftwater stuff.
Well, but fly fishing too, like you're in water. You're not like Nat. You're not a black cat. Like you.
Yeah, but mine wasn't
like to be in
really.
the water.
Mine was when I was younger. But really, I did maintain the information. I
Mhm.
held on to it because I love the outdoors so much, the
Mhm.
survival stuff and everything. That's like my jam.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten trained in that kind of stuff too. Probably not as intensely as Brittany did. But there are some like basics that'll save your life. If you're okay in the water, there are some basics that will save your life in swift water. You could bring me to a river right now, and I'd jump in with full confidence knowing that I'll make it out. I might be half a mile down the river, but I'll make it out.
But you'll get out.
And so, but the hard part is now,
Mm.
remember, Brittany and Natalie were about 20 yards behind me and David.
Mm.
my head snapped straight into get to Natalie.
Oh, I know your teeny wife who's downriver.
She's the only one that's horrible in the water.
Horrible. No.
I
He
mean,
wouldn't
it's
say
just
it that
true.
way.
It's just true. I'm not dissing
It's the
her.
truth.
It's true. She's not good.
Horrible in the water and a little stubborn.
Me and Brittany were raised by a special forces rescue diver.
Mm.
We weren't allowed out of the pool before, we got thrown in the pool and told we couldn't touch the sides of the bottom for an hour.
Yep.
We
Well,
did?
Nat said you guys are
Yeah.
both really,
remember
really
that.
strong swimmers
We're strong
and very
swimmers.
comfortable in the water.
And it's even just, it's just knowing what to do. And so I'm now faced the wrong direction to know what to do the right thing for me, because I went and grabbed.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Mhm. So anyway,
But you might have like conflicting instincts in a
Mhm.
moment like that.
yeah, because if you're by yourself, Brittany did it exactly right. And she can tell you that.
Yeah.
But me trying to grab Natalie
Mhm.
and make sure that she can get to,
Mhm.
and then you're faced the wrong way and the river's batting you around like a toy.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's my story up to the point where we're supposed to tell it.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah. So
Well, to your point, Preston, I did it maybe right, because what am I gonna do? Play hero with my 6'3" husband who's
right.
yeah,
250? I would do
Right.
him no good. So my goal was
Yeah.
watch my own self. I saw you going towards Nat. I trusted Press and Nat. They were gonna hang on to each other. I am
Yeah.
not losing David,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm gonna take care of my own self.
Well, and one of the biggest risks to David is if you try to go be a hero in a way that you can't, and then he's
Yeah.
trying to help you, and then he can't help himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
the whole
just
thing.
you're making more. Yeah.
It's the
and
whole
I
thing.
think that same idea that Brittany just said, they even teach rescue guys is that if you're
Mhm.
not safe, you don't do anybody any good.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Brittany has been taught that a lot in the fire department.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they teach tactical rescue guys that, they teach water rescue guys that,
Yes.
they teach a
Yeah.
lot of guys that. And so
Yeah.
that comes into play later on too,
Yeah.
after
Yes.
this part of the story.
Yeah. So one of the things that I felt in that moment was, and they did Press and Britt painted the picture. And Britt, I think you and I thought it was kind of a corner or a little like bend, because the boys were in, oh my gosh, because the boys were in
The
front
belly.
of us.
The belly.
The belly.
The boys were in front of us. So I don't think you and I were really paying attention to where the river went, but we saw it come around that corner.
Mm.
Regardless. And I just don't think you and I really noticed where it was going, but beyond that. But I remember seeing the water come around, and the immediate, and we're not going to say what I said, y'all.
I was going to ask you if you're going to actually say what you said.
I'm not going to say what I said because I have a lot of guilt still. But the immediate feeling I had was I am pissed.
Mm.
I am beyond pissed. And
At me.
well, not at you. I took it out on you in that.
Could have fooled me.
I took it out on you in that moment. But I was pissed because one, yes, I did want to turn around at one point, right? Or at a couple points.
Mhm.
And two, I knew these three
Would
like
get out.
2.5. Okay. Because David's advantage to him in situations is his size.
Oh, sheer height too. I mean,
Yes.
it
So-
takes more. Yeah.
So after I gave it some thought, I was mad because I was like, I'm the one who's going to bring not only risk to myself, but risk to all of them
Ugh.
because I'm the casualty. I'm the one who can't really swim, and I'm not big.
Mm.
Right. So like, even if David could withstand the river or Preston or even Britt, I was the one that was going to bring the issue. And I knew that.
Mm.
Right. So that was my biggest immediate emotion, was I was just effing furious.
Mm.
And again, I'm trying to mind my F words because of Janine's mother. And I
Yeah,
love
Tina. Tina's gonna be like, "Why are you cursing on the podcast?"
exactly.
Oh, Natalie.
I know.
Fine. Tina's
I know.
harmless. It's fine.
Well, Tina
Well,
loves
you guys,
me.
come on, you're the therapist, so you could like fear being shown as anger. That's common.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, and also I think
I swear
anger
a lot.
makes sense because you were already afraid, but anger feels more powerful. So your nervous system was like, F all of you, we need to all get out of here. Like, like we're in this boat, we're getting out.
And I wasn't, and again, it wasn't like I was mad at any one of them. In that moment, I did take it out on Preston because he did know that I wanted to turn around a couple of times.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like when I reflect on it, I wasn't mad at him. I was scared shitless that I was about to lose 3 of the most important people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so Brittany and I link arms. Preston and David catch up to us. Preston gets to me. And I was with you, Britt, and how I felt. Like at first I was like, okay, like I'm the one slipping because my boots also for what like they were not good river boots.
Mm-hmm.
They're wader boots, so they're great for fly
They're
fishing.
not waders. They're wading boots.
They're wading boots.
That matters.
But they weren't the
that-
best.
Okay, well anyway.
Wading boots would drown you.
Okay,
Waders would drown you.
Okay, wading boots is what I had. But they're not they're slippery.
Well, and your
So-
backpack was also shitty.
Well, my backpack, yeah, I mean, I had a bladder of water and a steel water bottle, which was just stupid.
Hmm.
So Brittany and I are holding on to each other. I'm falling because I'm slipping and she's trying to keep me up. Right. At one point, she's like holding my backpack.
I was
You're doing the
lifting your
Lord's
backpack
work,
in the air
Brittany.
so you wouldn't fall.
Bless you.
And I remember the moment when it hit me, and I'm curious for you too, when it hit me that this was a really bad situation was when we hit that first wall. Because we hit this first wall, and like Brittany had alluded to earlier, we all went under. And so when we did that, it was like bowling pins. We all went different directions in the river. Brittany went more right. David, I think, went right center, and Press and I, for whatever reason, got thrown to the left. So
Because there's different currents in the river, right? So even in one stretch of river.
We skipped over a little bit there. And this is the funny part is that where I think Brittany and I were attempting to do the same thing. We were yelling, which this is just a lesson learned. You should have the safety meeting before you ever start the hike.
For sure.
Oh no.
And
there's no safety meeting and you got a brother sister on board. That's going to be wild.
I was trying to bark out instructions in the moment, which is kind of pointless, and I think
I was doing the same thing.
Yeah. And it's like you're trying to teach people a technique while you're being swept away by the river.
During a tragedy.
Yeah. I'm yelling out, don't plant your feet, don't try to stand, to let the river take you, blah, blah, blah. And Brittany's yelling probably similar stuff. Keep your feet down.
I was just saying feet down the river, because that was the only thing that would maybe make sense that way. Because I was like, get your feet down the river.
Yep. And that's all I heard. So I heard Brittany yell feet down river. And so I'm sitting there and I'm doing the best I freaking
And why
can.
this is so you have pictures in your mind that bring tears to my eyes thinking about. There's a few of them during this process, but one of them was by this point I had reached Natalie, I had grabbed her.
We're not there yet.
Yes, we are. I grabbed Natalie. Now I'm facing backwards. I had passed Brittany and David. Now I'm facing back and I'm looking at Brittany and David. This is when I'm yelling the instructions.
Whatever, yeah.
I would do the same thing. And I'm seeing, it was kind of a powerful image watching David struggle. He's a huge dude. And watching Brittany behind him, almost like grabbing onto his shoulders, and David clambering to try and stay on his feet was a pretty wild image.
So this is why I wanted the 3 of us. I know, Brett, I'm going to cry. I was already crying on my drive thinking about all the things that we're going to cover.
Well, we
today.
already recorded this once and we both cried and nothing recorded. So I think we were supposed to do it together.
The fear in the face is really what sticks in your mind when I think about it. It's like everybody's having this realization right now that this is the real deal.
Yeah, we're in a really bad situation.
And I'm watching as that idea like sweeps over David and Brittany.
Yeah.
And it's coming over me. And man, your instincts just kick in. It's kind of a weird, it's a very strange moment.
Well, and so I am curious because so one of the big things that when people had asked me, what happened? What's Brittany's story? What's David's story? The craziest thing, like we said earlier, is we can all see the same car accident and have different stories. But for real, we all had very different experiences in the river because of the track, if you will, the current that each of us got taken into. So I actually, and this is why I really wanted you on, Britt, is I actually don't know your story. I don't know what, like the pieces.
The next part.
Yeah, I don't know the next part after we all hit that wall. Preston just shared what he saw.
Well, and also you should tell them
That
when
was
you hit the
before we-
wall, because this is the part that freaked me out as your friend. This is one of the scariest parts of it that I heard, was you guys hit the wall and then y'all go under.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that just sounds scary too, in and of itself. And then you get spun out, right?
Yeah. Brittany, and what I remember, Britt, is you and I, when we hit that first wall, you and I were still connected.
I was trying to hang on to you
Yeah.
as best as I could.
Yep. You and I were still connected, and David and Press were up with us, but they weren't. I didn't feel Press wasn't like linked
See,
on.
this is where the perspectives are going to be so different.
Okay. So,
Well, it was her focus of her mind, right? At that point, I
And
was her
so-
focus because I was right there
The whole time.
originally.
You
And
guys
then
didn't
she
hit the
didn't,
wall.
her mind
Yeah,
didn't
we
tell
did.
her there's someone else grabbing me.
Right.
but
Her
Britt, what-
mind was saying Brittany still has me.
yes. And so we all, I mean, we all hit the wall together.
Yeah.
I mean, like we all hit it at the same time.
Pretty
Pretty-
much.
Yeah. And we all went under and divided. And so I think what I would love for both you guys to do is share, and I'll share mine too. What happened after that? After we hit that wall and we all got divided, where did the river take you, Britt? Where did it take you, Press? And then I'll share mine too. And David, because I know, Britt, you saw David's experience. I know he's not here to share his, but you saw some of his.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like Preston was saying, we started running, right? And quickly, within 5-10 seconds, it took our feet out. And so it was still pretty shallow at that point, but we were like, oh my gosh, we're getting rushed down this river is probably everyone's. I mean, that was kind of my thought, like, whoa, my gosh, okay, our feet just got taken out. And that's when me and Preston, like, hey, get your feet down the river, whatever. Like, Preston was attempting to get to Nat. It started getting deeper, and then we hit the wall. I think we all go underwater. And for me, at that point, it probably wasn't that long, but it felt like forever when I was underwater. And that, like, I remember my mindset, like, oh, shoot, this isn't good. Like, because then you're trying to swim, right? But you can't just like swim up like you're in a pool because you're getting ripped around in this current and hitting stuff. So I finally try to get up and I'm hitting logs. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to drown under here because I'm under a bunch of trees. Like, I can't get up. This is insane. Finally, I do come up. And that's where I think you were saying, like, you and Press got pulled left. And so I'm like looking, I see you guys in kind of left a little bit. And I look and David's kind of to my right. So I'm like, okay, David's here. And then I see Nat like she keeps going under. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's way too far for me. Like, I can't do anything for her. No one can really do anything for anyone at this point in my head. But I see Preston swimming towards her. And then she comes up, and that's like a picture in my head. If I could like just snapshot it and send it to you guys, that'd be so cool. Or daunting, I'm not really sure. But that was the picture in my head. Preston was trying to get to you, and you come up, and you're surrounded by logs, and like you're like, I can literally just see you just gasp for air. Your face is covered in debris, and I see Preston grab onto you. So I'm like, okay, she's good. I turn and my attention I focus my attention on David because I had a dry bag on me, which was miraculously, I think, helping me a lot because it gave me buoyancy on my back where I kind of floated a little bit.
It helped you stay up a little.
so I wasn't getting rocked by rocks. I even was so dumb. I lost my hat and I saw it float beside me in front of me. And I was like, no, I don't want my hat, like a stupid girl. And I swam after it and grabbed it and put it back on.
Yeah.
So dumb.
The badassery. I mean, it wasn't smart.
Not dumb.
That's
but
not
it was
dumb.
badassery.
I had moments. I'll let you finish, but I had moments just like that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
not dumb.
So
I'm
weird.
real upset that I lost the hat that I had. Just so.
Oh,
But anyway, so I'm like focusing on David, and like when you were talking about seeing David's face and like my face and seeing him struggle with it, that's what got me. Like I told David afterwards, like, I never want to hear the noises you were making, just because I could every time he hit a rock, like my heart was breaking. I was like, I can't help him.
you couldn't help
This
it.
sucks. Yeah. So I just was, I can't, I can't remember saying much to him after that. I remember telling him like, feet down the river. But I just remember literally just repeating his name. I don't know why. But at that point, Press and Nat were gone. I was kind of able to, like, I would keep my feet down. Once I felt a rock, I would like kind of kick off of it so I wouldn't get hit by it. Okay, cool. And then I stood up on a rock. So I'm above the river. And then I see David float past me. And I'm like, shoot, I'm not losing him. Like, I'm not losing all three of them. So I jump back in after him. He's way more left. He like bear hugs this big boulder for dear life. And then I was able to get to like a higher point in the river and stand at the side. And that was like right next to him.
In like barely enough land to get out of the water.
Yeah,
and it wasn't even land at that time in the beginning.
You were still in the water.
Yeah.
But I was stuck there and I couldn't help David and I couldn't get around the corner to see where Press and Nat were.
And David's 6'4", and in the video that, if with your permission, we'll share, the water was up, I mean, almost to his shoulder blade. I mean, it was a little bit crazy because you can see his arms holding the rock, you know, but.
Well, and that was after probably 20, 30 minutes because my first initial thought was not like, oh, let's Instagram this. Let's snap it. Let's get the video.
Yeah,
you know, like,
it was after the water was coming down
that.
And your husband's on a rock and he's not going to let go.
I just remember seeing, and it'd be really nice to hear his piece of it, but I remember just seeing huge trees like nailing this rock. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please hold on. Please hold on.
Oh God. Oh.
I'll just interject for just a second, then I'll let you keep going.
You're good.
So I remember asking David afterwards, I was like, how did you swing around to the backside of that rock? Because he's got he's got the wingspan. He doesn't remember how, but by God's grace, he had somehow grabbed onto this massive, it was not a small rock, it was huge.
No, and it's the only thing in the river. Like when I was looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, that's the only thing he could even hold on to.
And he somehow swung around and he was on the down current side of the rock, and the rock was deflecting logs from hitting him.
Yeah.
And he said that every time, I'll just say part of David's story since he's not here. He said that every single time a log, he was stuck on that rock for like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And maybe longer. We don't know, but at least about 40 minutes. And he said every time a log would come by, he was sure the log was going to jump the rock and take him off of the rock.
Like hit him in the face.
And every single time the rock just deflected those logs around him.
Miraculous, really.
Sorry, go ahead, Britt.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So David's hugging onto this rock. I'm over on the side, useless. I mean, I am pacing. I puked a couple times because I think
that's adrenaline. Like
I was so stressed. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, Press and Nat. Like I was trying not to let my mind get there, but I'm like, this can't be good. Okay, like I just gotta make sure David's okay. Like I was focusing on David. How can I get to him? How can I help him? And he was yelling at me like, stay there. I'm like, okay. So I'm waiting and I'm like watching the water go down. So after, 45 minutes or who knows how long he was hanging on that rock, I'm like, the water's going down. Like, do you think you can walk to me? And he's like, I think I broke my leg. I mean, he's yelling this because it's still so loud. And I'm
I
like,
bet it was really loud.
yeah. And I'm like, shoot, okay. So we finally decide he needs my bag for the buoyancy. And I kind of could go around the corner just a little bit at that point. And I was like, there's a high spot around the corner. I was like, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to give you my bag. I'm going to give you my bag. We're going to fill it with air, like on purpose this time.
Yeah.
And you're going to jump in and you're going to get down to that high point. And we're like, okay, cool. Took me probably like 10 minutes just to get to him because I almost got swept away so many times. Luckily, I didn't lose my little walking stick. So I was like jamming it in rocks. And I almost got taken away like so many times. Finally, I was able to give him the bag. He jumped in, which was like, oh, another heart thing for me. I was like, oh my gosh, please don't get hurt again. So I can't really remember how. I think I jumped in and got back over to my initial spot and then was able to find him downriver. And when I found him, he was still like partially sitting in the water and his knee was like not where it should be. It was on the side of his leg. His shins were like covered in blood. And I was like, okay, we're good. And he's like, you have to, and he's like, he's freezing at this point. I mean, he's cold, but I'm realizing he's so cold because he's going in shock. And I'm like, okay. So we're like trying to get him out of the water. And then it starts raining. So we try to get him like next to a cliff so we're not getting rained on. Luckily, I had my dry bag. So I'm like covering him up with all of my extra clothes that I had. I'm making him change. He didn't have a coat. So he's like sitting there. I gave him my hat, which is great because it's like pink and purple and blue and orange. And because he lost his hat too. So I'm like just trying to keep him warm. Right. And I'm like, I have to go. I have to go find Preston now. So I walk as far as I can. And what I see broke my heart because I was like, no way those two made it through this alive. I mean, it was probably 30-foot tall boulders, and in between it was a tree. So they would have had to go under the tree and then hit another 20-30-foot tall boulder that maybe left like a 5-foot keyhole in between that and the canyon.
We have a picture in front of that boulder.
We do.
So I was like, so if they made it under this tree without getting knocked unconscious, then they would have had to get sucked under into this 5-foot little keyhole. And I can't make it across, like not a chance. And especially without risking leaving David. So I'm like, okay, so I go back, I sit with him for a while. At this point, my mind is like racing. I'm like, okay, he's freezing. He's scared. I'm trying to figure out what to do. Because it had been a long time by then. And I'm like, okay, they're going to come. Because it's a very popular hike. So, but how long is it going to take? So I'm like, I am zero prepared for any. I'm like, okay, I have nothing to start a fire. Do I even try to start a fire? What I'm trying to call 911. I'm trying to text SOS, satellite. Nothing's getting through. So my mind is definitely going there. So I'm just hugging David, trying to warm him up because he's freezing. And he goes, what is that? I'm like, what? And I look up the canyon and there's a couple just walking down. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I run up to them and I'm like, are you guys okay? And they're like, yeah, we just had picnic lunch up there. And I'm like, what?
But get this really quick. They were in that freaking canyon, that little slot canyon that we thought about going in, and it didn't get touched with the flood because the slant of that canyon of the ground and where the river was downhill, like
Not
slanted
downhill.
down.
The mouth of that little branch, the mouth that came into the main canyon,
Yeah.
was faced down canyon.
Yeah.
So
Oh, there we go.
So the current in the main river passed that slot canyon, and they were far enough into that slot
They didn't
canyon,
know.
they didn't even know what had
That's
happened.
what happened.
So they just start walking down like, isn't it a great day? Because it rained for 5 seconds, but it was a great day.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's insane.
So, and it's actually kind of funny. They're like, yeah, we're good. And they're like, are you guys okay? I was like, my husband's really hurt. He can't walk. And they're like, okay. So they come over. This nice man gives David his jacket, and they write down our names and our phone numbers, and they're like, we'll get help. And then I was like, if you see my brother and his wife, I'm like telling him their names and kind of their description. I was like, I don't know if they're alive. They don't know if we're alive, probably. So can you like just at least let them know if you see them that we're okay? And they're like, yeah, okay. So they leave, and then it still had been a while. And so David I think he started getting like maybe like this male mindset. Like he was kind of annoyed at himself. And like he's like, how do I stop shivering? Like how do I make this stop? And you got to focus on your breathing, like slow your breathing down. I'm like triaging him, right? I'm lifting up his shirt, I'm checking his head, I'm looking at his pupils, I'm like making sure I'm not seeing nothing else is going on. But I was like, and getting your mind off it. I was like, you're injured, but you're not injured to the point where you're in that kind of shock.
Well, and the shakes are, I mean, you've had a baby, right? Don't you have a 4-year-old, Brittany? So the labor shakes.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. So I can imagine too, as he's shaking, he's getting more and more tired.
Right. So I told him, I was like, here's what we can do. I was like, I know, but sorry. So after I went and looked for Preston Nat the first time, and I was like, oh, no way. Came back to him. He had put his knee back in place for the most part.
For the most part, he was like 90% there.
95.
I mean, it was still super loose, and it just kind of was tracking not correctly. So I was like, I tried to tie something around it, or I don't know. And I was like, we can move slowly. I was like, help is coming, but they can't help us here. This canyon is too thin where we are, or it's too like close together. No help is coming here unless it's coming that way, which is down river.
Yeah.
So we can move slowly. So it'll help you focus on something. And he was like, let's do it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So we get down to that point. We have to like slide down this huge rock. And I'm up there, like I slide down and I'm like holding my arms up, like trying to hold his weight up. So
you could have been pancaked.
Slide down.
Easy
I
peasy.
did my best. I was just trying not to let
For the
him drop
audience,
his
he's like
weight.
a 6'4" bodybuilder. So
Well, we'll post a picture of all of us.
Yeah.
I know. Well, so we get to that point where I was like, I couldn't get past, and I didn't think they got past. And then I see this boy.
So we're going to come back to that. So for you, Britt, like I said before, I didn't know any of your story. I just knew the pieces that I knew were that you got out first. You saw David go down. You got back in because you didn't want to lose him. And then you were able to get out again, and David was able to wrap himself around the rock, right? I had no clue how far you went down. I didn't know any of that. And so, I appreciate you sharing the story because, our listeners literally have been messaging us like, what happened? You and Janine have alluded to this. And I was like, I don't want to just tell my story because I don't know everybody else's.
Yeah.
Well, and
Right?
Brittany, my heart is beating so fast listening to you. I have a big husband, not a bodybuilder, but a big husband. And the idea of not being able to help him and knowing that he hurts and knowing that I can't carry him. I can't, there's nothing I can do. It's absolutely horrific. So you weren't in the river, but you might as well have been at that point.
Yeah.
Oh, friend.
Yeah. So Press, if you don't mind sharing your piece of after we all went under and, you know, like the bowling pin, sharing your part of the river before kind of the
Up until I found you.
up until you found me.
Okay. So starting at, when I'm looking back at David and Brittany, seeing their faces, I finally got my hands on Natalie. We get knocked apart, all of us, and by getting slammed against this wall. And I'll add this in. There's pieces in the canyon when you're doing the hike that you'll like hug one side because it's shallower and you're not like fully in the water. There's pieces of the hike when it's just normal where you could swim if you want to, or you could walk on one side of the canyon where there's ankle deep water.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep that in mind as we're flowing, as we're getting pushed down this river, we're not able to, figure out where the shallow end is. And so when we all get knocked apart, we're clearly in a deep enough part of the river to where it pushes us all under. And like Natalie said, bowling pins, I lose my grip on Natalie. I come up, and the funny thing about Brittany telling her story is that we both had the same moment. So when I came up and I couldn't see Natalie at first, and Brittany and David were further back now. From my perspective, we were just a little bit further downriver. I think that we got pushed into a piece that was a little bit of a faster current because we were all together at one point, and it didn't make any sense why we were like 20 or 30 feet ahead of them now. But we got pushed into a piece of the river where the current was fast. Okay. And I come up and I had a moment like that where, like what Brittany said, where I felt the lanyard of my trekking pole start to slip off my wrist. And even though in that deep of water, my trekking pole was useless. It was probably even more dangerous for me to try to hold on to it. My instinct was like, I like pushed my hand further into the lanyard and grabbed back onto the trekking pole. So like Brittany's instinct of like, oh, my hat. I was like, oh, my trekking pole. And then I remember losing my hat too. And my sunglasses were on there. And I remember this slight dumb moment of being bummed that I lost my hat.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what? Who cares? It's from a fly shop that's 5 minutes from my house. I'd go buy another one. Like, you know what I mean?
Your brain does weird stuff to keep you in the here and now.
It's just this moment of like, oh, my hat. And then you realize, like, who cares?
Oh, totally.
And so anyway, so I surface and I look up, and Brittany and David were almost just in my peripheral. I wasn't like looking directly at them because I was looking for Natalie. But I could see Brittany and David were further up. And then I see that same moment that Brittany talked about, Natalie's face that is stark white already comes up through this debris. And I only see her face and maybe like her collarbone. I mean, it's just like this it was that's another one of those images that I can't get out of my head. Like what I was talking about with Brittany and David's faces too. Like her face had tree bark on it and all the debris from the river. And so that was the moment that Brittany this is actually good that we're doing this because I had never put I didn't know Brittany saw that happen. And so I start swimming towards Natalie. I don't know how I was able to, but I did. And I grab her in what I know as the best way for a person attempting to rescue another person. You grab them from behind, basically with your arm around their chest. Okay. And I'm now, this is why I had said before, like my instinct, if I was by myself, I would have been treating this situation so differently. But now I'm faced the wrong direction. My back is downriver. I've got Natalie on my chest.
Oh, so you're looking upriver, moving that way, moving.
So our head is going downriver,
Yeah.
which is not good.
No, that's not what you want.
I'm looking behind me and I'm aiming. I'm seeing this bank of rocks that's pretty far down, but my plan is to slowly make my way to that side of the river so that we run into this piece of ground.
Yeah.
Natalie keeps saying, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die.
Mm.
And I keep saying, I'm not gonna let you die. I'm not gonna let you die.
Mm.
You can't really have a conversation in that moment. That's all you can really say. You're answering with like your most basic responses.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And the most humbling thing was at this moment, after I told her I wasn't gonna let her die, something took me out. A log, I think. Because I hadn't seen it. I was looking back behind me from my view. There was nothing in my way. And so it had to have been a log. And just pushes me under again.
Both of us.
Both of us. And I lost my grip on her. And when I came up, I was basically where I was aiming for, and Natalie was in the fast current. And I watch her as I'm in the slow current. I watch her get sucked downriver. And at this point, I can't see Brittany and David anymore. I'm so focused. They could have been close to me. I don't know. I don't think so though, because we ended up so much further downriver than they did. We're covering ground. I mean, we're covering more ground than you think you could have in that amount of time. And I watched Natalie get sucked, and the last thing I saw was her boots. And I just know. So I thought she got sucked under this rock. I thought she got pinned. And I'm thinking I'm exhausted. Like I could, I was like, and this is where I said before, I'm no good to anybody if I'm dead. And so I'm now at the rocks that I was aiming for. And so I climb out and I realize how beat my legs are. And I'm like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Just the adrenaline dump. I was like, okay. And so now I'm out of the water. I'm safe. I look up, couldn't see Brittany and David. I look down, can't see Natalie. This mound of rocks is high enough to where I kind of run up and over it to look downriver. Because I think if Natalie's alive, she's downriver.
Right.
If she's not, she's stuck under that rock right there. And there's nothing I can do about it if that's the case, because that river was, there's absolutely nothing you can do. I mean, and so I'm running up and down. Now I'm praying out loud. I'm like telling God, there's no way this is how it goes. And I'm thinking, at this point, I think I'm the only one alive. I'm looking at the river thinking, there's no way Brittany and David are alive. And I look and I see a similar, now the image that Brittany saw was further upriver, so there's no way it was the same thing. But I saw like a similar thing. I'm looking at this piece of the river that is ripping, and it is massive amounts of water pushing around massive boulders, trees, logs that had gotten dislodged. And I'm looking at this water thinking, everyone is dead. And I thought, I can't believe I took them on this hike. And I can't believe we kept going, And I'm just thinking, I'm so sorry. And your mind, it processes so many things at once. It's a pretty incredible what the human mind can do. In that moment, my mind even went fast forward and thought of telling my parents and Natalie's parents.
Oh yeah.
I mean, getting home and feeling that, I don't know why, but it just does. And so I'm running up and down and I'm basically I'm saying, God, you got to tell me what the right decision is. because I have two decisions here. If Natalie's for some reason up here and I can't see her and I jump in that river again, I'm gone and I can't help her. But if she's downriver from me, she's by herself.
Mm.
And so I make the decision. I think if she's alive, she's further downriver, and that's where I gotta go. So I find a place that's deep enough, and I just jumped back in. And this time I was more planned about it. I was facing downriver. I was able to put my hand against the walls and kind of push off. And kind of, I went around a couple bends, and then I see when I come around this one side of the bend, the river's pretty decently wide by this point, and I see legs running up this hill.
Mm.
And so I start swimming towards that side of the river. And I got into an eddy, which is awesome. An eddy is where the river swirls on the side. It's popular, like where rafting guides will pull the raft over
Yeah.
to take a break and let people pee and stuff like that. Because it's calm enough to where even when the river's ripping, you can stand in it, you can pull the raft over in it, and
Yeah.
all this. And so I finally get to a point where I feel the current just die.
Mm.
And I stood up and I'm walking, and now these young guys are walking towards me down this hill. And they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay. Do you have my wife?"
As if they know that I'm his wife anyway.
Well, how many
Yeah.
more people were in the river?
It's true.
And so they were like, "Yeah, we have her." And I was like, "What's her name?"
Mhm.
And they yell up to their friends. They were saying, "What's her name? What's her name?" And then they yelled back at me and they said, "Her name is Natalie." And I just was, and they, the guys were trying to help me. And I'm standing there like, just get me to my wife.
Mhm.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I wasn't trying to be me, I was just, and it's hard to convince them at that point because they see you coming out of the same river and they are convinced that something has to be wrong.
Mm-mm.
And I keep telling them, I promise I'm okay. Just tend to my wife. So I get on land. I finally make it to Natalie. I see that she's alive. I can see that she's in shock. Um, you know, the way she's moving and things, it was pretty easy to see she had no like super major injuries. She just was pale white, shivering.
Mm.
And I was at this point, I had a checklist in my mind. My priorities were sharp. I was like, Natalie's alive. Now I just need to know that Brittany and David are okay.
Mm-hmm.
I will camp in this canyon overnight. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I did have stuff to make fire with me.
Yeah.
I had an inReach unit, which I didn't end up needing actually. We can tell that part later. But and so every time there was word of someone coming down the canyon, Natalie was in perfectly good hands. There was like all these girls
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
There was military guys there helping her. And
they had supplies and everything.
Yeah. So anyway, I from that point until, and this part of the story will come next, but it was over an hour until we knew Brittany and David were alive.
But we'll share that here in just a second.
And that's all Natalie kept on asking me. She just goes, "Do you think they're okay?" And I didn't know I couldn't lie to her. I was like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Like, I hope so.
Yeah.
Mm.
So for you, Press, the biggest things that I heard you say were that you felt really, to some degree, really guilty about pushing us forward. You feeling like you pushed us forward. Yeah. And just fear that you were the only one that had survived at this point. While you were in the river, it was, I'm the only one that's alive, and I can't believe this is how it all went down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll start at that same point bowling pins, right? We all get pushed.
Mm.
My recollection of this is probably very different than Press and Britt because they were able, from what I just gathered, were able to kind of keep their heads above water much more than I was.
They saw a lot more than you did, that's for sure, because you were in it.
Yeah, they saw, and I mean, Janine, you know this because you've heard the story a few times. Yes. So I didn't know any of your story, Britt, and I knew most of Preston's, but some of it I didn't know.
Mm-mm.
So for me, once we got split by like bowling pins, like Brittany said, I was just under like a bunch. I don't think I could catch a break. And I don't know if it was because of my backpack or because I'm just such a shitty swimmer. I don't know. So I remember being pushed down, pushed down, pushed down. I had no clue, Brittany, that you could still see us when I came up for air that at that one point. So for me, I came up for air. I remember that part like perfectly. And I remember Preston being right next to me. And there was like also a log, and I had like pushed myself up a little. It wasn't a big log. And I grabbed some air, and I do remember feeling one that I was going to die because I was like, again, like I said before, I'm the casualty out of the four of us, right? Like I'm the one who doesn't have size. I'm the one who can't really swim. So I'm like, I'm done. Like I'm screwed, right? I see Preston and he's like, I got you. You know, I'm not going to let you go. Keep going down. And then we both go under at whatever point. I don't have a ton of recollection of everything I hit. I have no clue. I remember well, and I'll get there, but no clue what I hit. Didn't know where I went under. Didn't know if I hit trees, if I hit walls. I had no clue. What I remember after going under after Preston saw me and coming back up at some point was probably just right before I got pulled out. So my river story is actually going to be much shorter than theirs because again, I don't remember a ton of it.
No, you're just fighting for your life, like literally fighting for your life.
Yep. So I come up and I remember feeling, and I think all of you guys know this. I remember feeling all of the like circulation in my arms and legs leave because I couldn't move my arms and my legs. And I knew like people were like, were you paralyzed? You think no, had nothing to do with that. I just couldn't move them. Like I couldn't keep swimming. My body, like Preston said, your body's exhausted after fighting something like that. So I remember my body was exhausted. I literally could not move my arms and my legs. And the biggest things that I actually remember are more of what Preston was saying, the thoughts that come into your brain. So the first thought I had when I couldn't swim anymore or fight anymore was I had this weird feeling Preston was okay. I was like, the two biggest things that came to my brain were Brittany and David and Rory because they have their 4-year-old. And I remember praying when I like was because at this point, and this sounds dramatic, but I'm just being truthful. At this point, when I couldn't feel my arms and my legs and I couldn't keep swimming, I was like, I'm dying. I'm going to die. It wasn't I might die. It was I'm going to die. And I actually didn't feel as scared as I did earlier in the river because I just knew, like, I was like, I just know that this is what happens. So I was terrified for Brittany and David. And I was like, God, you can't take Rory's parents. Like, that's insane. She is 4. And so I was praying about that. And I was like, God, you can't, like, they have to be okay. They have to be okay. That was like the biggest thought, one of the biggest thoughts going through my head. And then the other one was I said that I would share with our listeners that I was pregnant. I'm still pregnant, just so we all know, but I was pregnant during this time. And I was like, we have been trying for this family for years. And this is how this ends. Preston not only loses maybe his sister, his brother-in-law, and his wife, but also this baby that we've been working so hard for and waiting for and praying for. So I was like, I can't believe that this is how this goes down. And I was praying and I just said, God, please let Brittany and David be okay. They have a little girl. That can't be her life. That can't be her reality. And I was like, genuinely, I was like, Preston's fine. He's fine.
You told me that, which I think is a little bit hilarious, but that was one of the first things you told me is I just kind of knew that Preston and Brittany were probably both fine, but Preston in particular.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said out of the four of us, Britt and Press have the strongest survival rate here because they're the strongest swimmers. They have water training. So I kind of knew that Preston was okay. I thought, and this came to me later, and Preston was just saying he had this similar thought that Brittany is probably okay potentially too because she's a strong swimmer. But while I was in the river, I wasn't thinking that. I was just praying that they were okay because of their little girl. I was mad that this was how it was going to go down for my family. And I genuinely was like, I just can't believe it. Like I'm 36 and this is wild. I just turned 36. So that was kind of when I started to like kind of not give up, but just kind of say like, okay, like I can't get myself out of this. I am not strong enough to get myself out of this at this point. And that was when I felt somebody grab my arm, right? His name's DeMarcus. I didn't know this at the time. It's not like I was like, hey, what's your name? Thank you.
Hey, bro.
And then he was able to grab both arms and he actually gave an interview. We'll post that too, with the Air Force. The Air Force asked me to give an interview as well.
Yeah.
And he talked about how he also got hit with this big log trying to get me out, but was able to maneuver the two of us, let the log go around us, and he got me to safety. Him and his buddies pull me out. And they get me up to safe land. Couple minutes later, I hear them shouting. I'm not processing much yet because similar to what Brittany was saying about David, I was in total shock, complete shock. I couldn't really think. When they pulled me out, I remember having this like weird panic mode of like, okay, I'm good. Let me walk. Like stop carrying me. But I couldn't talk and I literally could not move. I could not move my legs and I could not move my arms. But I remember in my brain, I was like, okay, I'm good. Like, I'm good. But I couldn't say anything and I couldn't do anything. It was the weirdest feeling to not have like any control over my body. So they sat me down, these girls. So there was two groups. There was a California group and a Nevada group. Okay. California group. I thought they were all together. Again, I could not make sense of anything. I didn't know who pulled me out. I didn't know who saved my life. I had no clue. So these girls are like stripping me and putting their clothes on me because I didn't have any dry clothes because they're thinking, well, she's freezing, but really I'm in shock. I'm probably a little both.
We should clarify why they were dry. They were far enough down in the river, and where they were when the flash flood hit, conveniently, great for them, was they were right at one of the big bends of the river where there was actually a pretty high mound of earth that came about 20 feet out of the water. And so when that flash flood hit, they were able to just run up the hill. So that's why they were dry.
They didn't get hit really with any of the water. They were able to kind of get out. Yeah.
So they get me out there. The girls are taking care of me. The boys are asking me, are you by yourself? And I was like, no. And I can't really talk, but I said, no, my husband and my sister and my brother-in-law. And that's what I kept saying. I was like, there was four of us. There's three others that aren't with me. So then we see these two hikers come down. Preston does. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm with Natalie, and at this point, so now I just have that second priority in my mind, which is knowing that Brittany and David were alive. And those two hikers that Brittany had talked about that came out of that slot canyon, they came down the river. So every time those guys had these two guys at the top of the piece of land, and they were kind of looking up river to see if anybody else came down, and they yelled like, a couple is coming down. And I was like, oh my God. So I run up, and as I'm running up, they're like, and I was like, are they young? And they're like, no, they're probably in their 50s. And I'm like, damn. And so,
oh, your heart must have just been like, ugh.
So the woman looks at me and she goes, Natalie? And I was like, who told you that?
Hmm.
I was like, Brittany and David, my sister. And they were like, yeah, are you Preston and Natalie? And I was like, yeah, we're here. And I was like, they're alive. And they were like, yeah. And so because of David's leg, because of what it looked like, because of the blood and the knee, the way this guy described it to me, not his fault, obviously, but just the way he described it to me made me think that David must have had a compound fracture.
Like in his shin.
He said his
Oh,
leg was
yeah.
snapped in half and there was blood everywhere and he was in shock. And
It was so bad.
oh my God. And I'm
People
This is how
are
rumors
so
get started.
dramatic. I will,
Oh my
I
God.
will say that, like, working in a first responder type industry, people are just like, calm the F down.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
people are so dramatic with their stories. Like, your
Yeah.
house is not burning down. There's
Yeah.
a candle in the window.
Yeah.
The person
Right.
is not dying. They're sleeping on the sidewalk. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
100%.
Go.
So this is huge because that's what I started to kind of interrupt Natalie earlier. And I said that was one of my answers was I didn't know that Brittany and David were okay. I know Brittany knows what to do, but I also know that that river will make a fool out of anybody. And like, so one of my answers, one of the however many times Natalie was like, do you think they're okay? Do you think they're okay? One of my answers at one point was like, Brittany knows what to do. She's strong in the water. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't know how to answer it. But
I
anyway.
think he was trying to make me feel better because I literally, it was like a broken record. I was like, do you think they're okay? I'm really worried about them. Oh my God, did they die? You know, like it was just
When
this,
you're exhausted, so your brain's focused on one thing.
yeah, and it was them.
And
And
this
it
was
was
about
them.
an hour,
It was them.
okay? Between
Yeah.
the point when we get all separated, when Brittany
Mhm.
and David are up on land and we're on land, like over an hour passes.
Mhm.
And so there was over an hour of me and Natalie just together, not having any idea if Brittany and David were okay.
It's freaking
And vice
horrible.
versa. Brittany and David up there not knowing if we were okay. Brittany had shared that already, how she kept running down to look
Mhm.
and see and seeing that the river was impassable at the point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
So
when that couple came down and said that they're alive, I was just
Mhm.
that's when the priorities in my head, it was so simplified. That's when I'm like, that's all I need to know.
Mhm.
That's
Oh,
all I need to know.
he burst into tears. He ran to me because I'm like still like half out of it. Like I'm like drunk because I'm just like got banged around. Preston yanks this like big ass
Pine cone.
pine cone out of my hair. Yanked it. It was
Well, you're
stuck.
probably like your body is just there are
Oh.
not enough happy chemicals in the world. So your brain's going dopamine, 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 adrenaline.
I was haggard as crap, pine cones in my hair. I had a massive bump too in a similar spot to where the pine cone was. And because the girls were like, you know, digging around, making sure I wasn't bleeding like crazy. And they feel my head. They're like, she for sure hit her head on something. But Preston runs up to me and he's like, they're alive, and bursts into tears. I'm crying. And yeah, so at that point we know that they're okay. So DeMarcus and his friends, so he's in the Air Force with his buddies. There's like 5 of them. Okay, they're the Nevada crew. I don't even like know who saved me. Everyone's running around. It's crazy. So they hear that Brittany and David are okay. They start like running up
And
river.
It's worth saying this just for the listener. Like in that hour, you know, as the river comes on so quickly, in that hour that we're waiting, we were watching the river come down.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to keep Natalie warm.
Mhm.
And I'm watching these young guys and they keep going and kind of testing the river.
Yeah.
They keep on kind of walking into the current a little bit to see. And then eventually I see them crossing it and they're like,
Mhm.
we could leave if we want to.
Yeah.
Natalie's saying, I'm not getting back in that river. And I'm like,
totally, yeah.
I don't know how we're getting out of
But
here.
that
I'd be like,
yeah.
bring a yacht up here to take me home. There's no way.
When Natalie says they went up to get Brittany and David, that's so
The
that,
river had gone down.
that couple had come
It
down.
doesn't matter. I'd be like, we have people for this.
Haven't-
I know.
I pay
For this.
taxes.
We got
Okay.
rescuers.
Yeah.
So these boys, and this is what I want Brittany to jump back into because this was where she was heading just a minute ago. So these boys go running upriver to get. And what happens when they get to you, Britt?
Yeah, so we slide down those big rocks, and I'm like staring at this big like whirlpool of still very rushing water, and I'm like, I could probably get across. I mean, it would not be pretty because I don't got the height or weight to like fight the water, but I'm like, I could do this. I'm like, my husband can barely walk. He's not fighting any current with his knee. Every time he steps, I can see his kneecap move to the side. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'm like staring at this river. And then I just see a person come around the corner on the other side. And I'm like, people. I'm like, I seriously, I'm like, are we in a different world? Because I'm like, these people are just still hiking up the canyon like it's another day at the Narrows. Like, why are these people going upriver right now?
Yeah, that would have been wild.
Literally, I was like, these boys are so, and they're trying to yell at me. It's so loud still. Like, we're probably, I don't know, 15, 20 yards away from each other. And I can't, like, you can barely hear each other. So, and I was like, oh my gosh, are you guys coming up? Like, are you coming up? Can you help us? Like, my husband's hurt. And I couldn't hear them. And they were pointing at David and like, is that him? And I was like, yeah, that's my husband. He's hurt. Like, I didn't know what. And then we kind of communicated. And he said something about Preston and Nat. And I was like, what? I was like, you know my brother? And they're like, yeah, they're okay. And I just, same thing, Nat, like with Press, like I broke down. Like you could see David, like he's not a crier. He was like, was all choked up. So they like chain link across this river, body, like cross arms, all of them chain link. I am literally like bear hugging David and having him put almost all of his weight on me. I step first so I can get holding. He steps next. I step again. He steps next. And then we make it to the first guy in like the chain link of the river. And DeMarcus like kind of takes my spot because he's taller than me. I mean, he can help David a little bit more than I can. And I like kind of like slip and fall into him. So I have to like get my bearings again. And they're trying to get David across. And I remember David falling. So he's in the river again, but they're like standing there like this wall. So they're just holding him and they try to get him back up. So they get him up. We get on dry land. We walk across these rocks or whatever. Then we have to go back down into the river. And it's pretty shallow and calm at this point where we got back in because it was wider. And then I think that's where we were going to meet Preston and Nat. And Preston saw me. I think I was still so zoned out. Like, I think my adrenaline of making sure David was okay. Yeah. And like my planner mode finally dropped. And I was just like, bleh. Like, I wasn't even thinking at this point. I'm like, they're alive. We're alive. We're a little beat up, but we're alive, you know, and we're moving in the right direction. So I wasn't even thinking until Preston was like 2 feet in front of my face, I think. And I was just, grabbed him, hugged him. Yeah. And then we went and found Nat. And
the second I saw you, I lost my cool.
Saw you crying. So I went and hugged you and was crying. And that's when like more and more helicopters were running around us.
Yeah,
up top, and we're getting you guys out.
Yeah.
The moment, so we knew that they were going to get you, and I could see you guys coming for like 200 yards, and I just couldn't. You know, I was standing there.
He's like a puppy,
and one of the other kids was.
I believe that totally.
And I say kid, I don't mean it disrespectfully. They were just much younger than we are. I mean, they were like 20. They were probably 20. but they were Air Force guys. And
That's
whatever.
I'm like, I'm not that much older than them, and I was like these boys, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
say that these
Right.
they're
Right.
men,
But
I guess, but they're just so young.
they're the heroes here, obviously, like super capable, but yeah, just young guys. And so he's standing next to me, waiting with me, and I'm just kind of watching them like slowly come down the river, and I just couldn't stand it any longer.
Golden
And
retriever. Golden.
so
And
I
that's like,
start.
nobody help me anymore. Preston's like, I'm gonna run up the river.
Literally.
So I start hiking up the river, and yeah, Brittany, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if she just didn't, if she was just like out of it or what, because I got pretty close to her before she realized it was me.
Mm-hmm.
And from her perspective, she's looking at like 8 different guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just in the mix of all those different guys, but I was probably only like 10, 15 feet from her when she actually finally noticed it was me.
Mm-hmm.
And she lost it and I lost it. And then I feel bad. David doesn't even remember me passing him, but I passed him and I grabbed him on the shoulder and they slapped him on the chest. And and I passed him and I went straight to Brittany and grabbed her, and we're just crying and hugging each other, and then we held hands all the way back down to the land to where we got out of the river again. Me and Brittany did, and then and then that's when like Brittany said, she went and met up with Natalie, and we're all
we're all crying.
Now we're all together.
Oh, and then I ripped David's old shirt in half with my teeth, and I tied it around his knee so his knee would stop falling out of place.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. We were a sight for sore eyes. So one of the things, and I'm going to quickly go through the next part. We could go into many details of feelings and all that stuff, but we essentially all got in the river. It took me some convincing and many military men to surround me, to get me back in that river. And David and I were helicoptered out. David because of his knee, and me really because of the shock that I was in. And I was like, I'm going to have to swim. Like,
absolutely
going to be
not.
higher. And the guy actually said a really cool thing. And I was pregnant, and this is my first pregnancy. I don't know how this stuff goes. I don't want to stress myself out any more than I already was. So, and the guy said, I would rather, he goes, because everyone keeps asking, was this flight for life? No, y'all, David and I would have sucked our asses up and we would have hiked out, because we're not paying $30,000 to $50,000 fine.
No.
So it was state patrol. So it was a free ride for us. They got us out of the river safely, which actually probably kept the other group, Brit, Press, and then the other 2 groups that were with us safe, because they didn't have to help 2, one very injured and then one individual who's like, I'm never getting into water again and I'm still in shock mode. So it probably kept everyone else safer by doing that. So we all get to land, right? Dave and I get to this one place. I go to the ER because I was having chest pain and I was having a hard time breathing, right? So that was the main reason they took me. They're like, your baby, I was 6 weeks pregnant at the time. They're like,
you can't really check anything.
You can't do anything, but they really wanted to make sure that I didn't have water in my lungs because I had spent so much time in the river.
Yeah.
Brit and Press, I'm going to rush through your part, but I think when y'all get out is like pretty comical. So Brit and Press hike their way out. Right. But they get to the end and a ranger comes up to them and says, what?
Gosh, I can't even remember what he said exactly, but he was like, just so you guys know, this was the worst day to do this hike.
Yeah.
Like, thanks, bro. That would have been useful 7 hours ago.
We just hiked 7 miles up. We're in a flash flood for how many hours? And then hiked back down these 7 miles, and now you're gonna lecture me? And I was like, yeah, sorry, you probably get sick of this.
Oh.
And then the California people that were like dolls, like taking care of you and offered like me some snacks and David some ibuprofen or whatever, but they're like, you want to take a selfie? And I was like, no.
No.
I want to go home. I want to get dry. I have dirt in places I didn't know I had.
Nat still won't
I
show me
literally
the
was dumping
picture.
out my pockets. You guys too, like my shoes. It was. I'm like, I want to go find my husband.
Mhm.
I want to go find Natalie. I want to go eat food and be dry and warm.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
want to take a selfie.
Like,
Nat
I just
still
Yeah.
want
won't
you to
show
get
me
out
the
of this
picture.
horrible
And
nightmare.
Here's the crazy
Oh yeah,
thing.
no.
Here, me and Brittany now, nobody, and if we would have maybe asked, possibly someone would have driven us,
Mhm.
but we had to take the shuttle back out.
For 45 minutes.
like we were still on
there.
vacation, and them telling us where the helicopter dropped people off was like super vague and
No one knew.
confusing.
No one knew.
And so
we didn't even know.
we got off at the wrong stop.
Oh
and
my
we're
gosh.
probably by this point the soreness in my legs is setting in,
Mhm.
and we're like hobbling around this massive, it's a big lodge area that you can go stay. It's beautiful, everything like that. We're like
Right.
walking across the entire property to where they said the helicopter dropped people off at.
Mhm.
Nobody knows. And finally, it was a groundskeeper guy coming out of the groundskeeper cabin. And we were technically, I think, trespassing because we were in the employees only, like groundskeeper
Oh, I
area.
think we knew because you were like, Preston or Britt, this says employees only. I'm like, I don't care.
Don't care.
I'm gonna find someone.
Yeah, that's right. And so we walk up to this guy that's got like a golf cart with full of like rakes and stuff. He's clearly like working. And we ask him, did a helicopter land here? And he goes, no. And he goes, usually it's right there in that grass patch.
Nope.
And we said we were told there was a helipad. And he goes, oh, well, the helipad isn't here. It's down at the main entrance. And we're,
Yeah.
okay.
It was a dumpster fire.
We had to make it all the way back to where the shuttle picks you up. So we ask him, can you just give us a ride in your golf cart to the shuttle? And he goes, yeah, that's fine. Hop in. And he's probably didn't know what we had just gone through. And we're just quiet and like sitting there, like pouting basically.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to be polite, but we're in our own heads doing whatever our minds are doing. And, thank you. But anyway, finally, we had to take the shuttle all the way back.
Oh my gosh. That's like funny and uncomfortable.
Well, and
like,
yeah.
And David
I'm on a
told
bus.
me this later. David was like, he got to where he was supposed to meet them, and poor guy's like limping around on his bum knee, blood just like
Oh my
dried
gosh.
on his shins or whatever. And he he looks haggard. They look haggard. I mean, it was a sight to see, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and I
So-
have to tell you my 2 seconds. Okay. Here's my 2 seconds. Number one, Nat and I talk about everything. I don't worry about her. She's a mountain goat. She does what she wants. I don't ever worry, ever. This trip had me, I didn't feel good about it, which was very weird. I'm asking Natalie to be careful, which I never do. I've never told you to be careful in our whole friendship ever because I just trust her. You guys know what you're doing, y'all outdoorsy, athletic people. It's fantastic. I don't worry about you at all. I was genuinely really worried about the trip, and Nat and I had a conversation about just taking it easy and being safe. And it was weird. And obviously I knew you were pregnant. I was one of the happy few that knew that you were pregnant. But then you freaking text me from the ambulance. She texted me from the ambulance, and I was like, oh my God, because I know you well enough to know you wouldn't freak me out for no reason. You still won't show me the picture when they pulled you out because I think you're trying to spare me that visual, to be honest, because I was absolutely a wreck for days. And I'm so thankful. I mean, you guys know Nat is chosen family to me. I have family that I love that I'm very tight with, and Nat is chosen family, and you guys are family by extension. Brittany, I feel like I know you. Preston, I know you. And and your husband's amazing and such a badass for holding on to that rock. It's ridiculous. But I'm just so incredibly grateful. I'm so incredibly grateful that you're all okay. And what a miracle. And Nat actually wasn't the only pregnant person on that hike that day.
So we are
It
expecting.
was David. No.
David is due in April.
David, we need to
It's a weird
talk.
family.
Oh my
We need to
God.
talk. So fun surprise, we find out that Brittany is literally 7 days behind me. So she was 5 weeks, I was 6 weeks. And so we have 2 future Olympian swimmers.
Yes. Badass cousins.
Badass
Something.
cousins who are
Little tumble buddies.
little tumble buddies who are going to be
Buddies.
little badasses. So
Oh my God, put that on a onesie, please. That's adorable.
tumble buddies.
Tumble buddies.
I will have them made like tomorrow.
That has to happen.
So the exciting thing is we're expecting a little girl. Britt and David are expecting a little boy. And so there was 6 of us on this trip together, and miraculously we all lived. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned is 2 big things. One, and I've said this before, I will never think I am the exception to the rule of Mother Nature. And same thing with my family. That day humbled the shit out of me. And 2, there is actually nothing more important than family. And the amount of fear I had, and I think I can speak for all 4 of us, the amount of fear we had of losing each other really showed me, like, you have to just, hug your people, tell them that you love them, spend time with people, let your family know that you're there, because it can all change really, really quickly. So I think I'll leave us with that. Any last thoughts from Britt or Press?
I'll say this. We all kind of separately had the thought of like, it's really good that it was just us, because the year before we went with more people. And I can't even imagine. There's no way more than 4 would have made it out of that alive. Like Brittany and I being somewhat comfortable in trying to figure out our own way out of that kind of situation, and then David's ability to hang on to that rock, and somebody being able to save Natalie's life. Like how many times can you multiply that blessing of things falling into place just right, and all of us making it out pretty much unscathed? Just like David probably had the worst of it all with his knee, and then, but as far as injuries go, but like to make it out of something like that, all 4 of us totally okay. Both girls who are pregnant are still pregnant, baby's healthy, which I know was a scare for Brittany and Natalie was real worried about it too. I was worried too, but
of course,
we did not know that Brittany was pregnant at the time. So
I'm still a little salty about it, but it's fine. I'm getting over it.
Come on.
she'll get over it, Brittany. Give her a minute. She'll get over it.
Brittany didn't even tell us. We finished our vacation, by the way. We stayed there for like another 2 days. Okay.
Yeah, we did.
I will tell you, my mom, Tina, the one who doesn't like when we drop an F-bomb on the podcast, was like, I will fly there and get her myself. She needs to come home. I don't understand what's happening. It was so funny. I'm all protective.
I may or may not have looked at flights that night, but that's okay. Yeah. So I am so thankful, obviously, for you guys sharing your parts of your story on here, Britt and Press. Thank you so much for showing up and being vulnerable and willing. And I'm just thankful that I get to have more time with all of you. And I just love you all so much.
I love you too. I'm so glad you're okay. Thanks for telling the story. Thanks for listening, you guys. And as always,
bye,
forensic friends.
I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening, and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.